Now anybody who's played Rust knows what it's like to raid. The rush of adrenaline, the blood pumping through your veins, and even the excitement of scoping some pretty interesting loot. Sometimes the raid is justified though, and you end up taking out someone who's being just a general asshole in the server. But in order to tell that tale, I'm going to have to go way back to the summer when I basically started playing Rust. Now I had played on the official servers and then a couple other servers after that, just trying to get a feel for the game. Then my friend Kitsune realized that, hey, you've got Rust now. How's about you join me, I'll find us a noob server and I'll show you the ropes. I said sure, why not, and after a couple wipes, really 2 wipes, we ended up settling on the wipe of which we took this video. Now we had encountered some jerks at this point, mainly people who would set up a turret outside pointing directly at our entrance of our base, which we quickly thwarted thanks to our refinery base. But there were other fish to fry. And, well, Kitchen was quickly learning that I would be an asset to him in Rust, not only because of my scouting abilities, if you want to call it that, but the fact that I was ballsy enough to try and go after every airdrop we possibly could. Now, we had made a few, well, there was a couple of assholes who decided to come after us, and I will admit that they did bait me a few times into an argument. But, all in all, it actually wasn't too bad of a server. Now, I do want to point out that this is not Mario's server. This was a noob server where there's no kill on site and stuff like that. And in addition, I did have some problems while I was recording. While I was recording, I didn't realize that in the first little segments where you're going to see us take down the base itself, I didn't realize that it wasn't recording any audio. And I did restart the recording once I found out that there was no audio. But that's beside the point. I also want to point out that this story is about one of the most hated groups in Rust. Besides hackers, there's also roof campers, and all they do is they set up a base so they can just sit on top of the roof and take out easy players like nakeds or people with a lot of gear, just so they don't have to go out and farm it themselves. They also think it's funny and, well, really they have nothing better to do than to just be an asshole. And, well, as soon as I saw what was going on here, I knew that we're going to end up having to raid these guys. And it seemed like a pretty juicy raid too. But they also made a lot of fundamental and very crucial mistakes that we were able to exploit. And again, Kitsune quickly realized that not only was I a ballsy bitch, but I also had a tendency to, well, scout things out rather well. Now, this all came to a head one day when I was out scavenging and looking for supplies. As I was headed towards bandit camp that way, I noticed a weird structure out in the middle of nowhere. It looked like a weird tower, and, well, at first I thought maybe it's a heli tower, but then I realized, no, this is probably roof campers. And eventually that weird red tower up at the top, that ended up going, well, away. Either they took it down or it decayed. But this is how things were laid out. We had the roof campers in this weird wild swamp area, and over towards the right, we ended up having bandit camp. You could also see water treatment plant and a couple other monuments from there, and as I eventually learned, what they were doing was they were basically roof camping. Not only were they roof camping, but they additionally had air supply drops. What they'd do is they'd throw this out, call in a supply drop, and basically they were using it as bait to get people to come near so they could scope it out and kill them. Now, they ended up getting one person, and I was warning others, but they didn't know exactly where I was, and, well, that one person got away, pretty much warned them as well. I snuck up under the cover of the night, and as I sat underneath their base, I could hear them talking about what they want to set up. Turrets on the roof, and then an outer layer of turrets as well on foundations. They didn't know I was underneath them because I'd snuck up, and one of them had run past me in the darkness but didn't see me. I ended up letting myself die so they wouldn't know I was there and coming back and scoping it out later. It was pretty heavily armored, and they were using a lot of exploits to try and build up the base. But I knew exactly what we were looking for, and since me and Kitsune now knew exactly what they were doing because they had been in a public voice chat, we knew the layout, and when we were ready, we set up our raid base and decided to go over and raid them. Now, luckily for us, because they had mentioned where they were going to put our turrets, where they were going to put the perimeter and everything like that, we knew exactly where to hit them. And while I was hiding underneath them that night, I heard them say a fateful quote, one that annoyed me. "I wonder how long it'll be before someone raids this base." Now, we didn't know exactly who it was except for 2 guys, but I decided, well, let's show these guys just how quickly somebody can raid their base. So, our idea was to try and take out the main structure, like the core, but then we realized that because of how they were using exploits to try and build up their base, it was going to be near impossible to try and take out the walls and be able to take out the entirety of the tower itself. There basically would have been, I think, a floating bit. So we ended up saying screw this and, well, decided to take out a less than stable part. Already, when we took it down the base, we were finding loot. A lot of ammo. Well, that'll keep our turrets on our base well stocked. And if we ended up getting into a firefight, at least we wouldn't have to worry about running out of ammo. Now, we did have to be careful because between me originally encountering the base and between me scouting it out several times, several mines have been placed down. Now, I'm not sure if the mines were there when I was traversing the place in the darkness, or if they just put them down afterwards. Either way, we had to be careful in where we were stepping. Now, you're basically seeing a lot of the loot that I had picked up, not including what Kitsune had picked up himself. But it all came to a head in the end. As you can see, some mediocre stuff, and then a whole bunch of sulfur. Profit! As well as some more raiding supplies. Awesome. Now, we didn't notice Sabretooth here, the guy who ran past me in the darkness and didn't even see that I was there, but we couldn't get to him just yet, and, well, we were going to save him for a little later. There was a whole bunch of bags everywhere, so time was of the essence, and we didn't expect there to be this much loot there. But considering that they were basically roof camping everyone, going out and getting some supplies for themselves, but using airdrops and going after everybody else in way of roof camping, yeah, we started to realize that maybe there was. As you can see here, there was some air supply drops left, ones that quickly became ours, and we called them in, eventually. And let me tell you, it was glorious and it was fun. So quickly, we realized that we had more supplies and resources than we knew what to do with, really. So it was quickly an exercise of how quickly can we build up all these chests, put stuff into TC, and just try to... It was just a matter of we need to move loot quickly into our raid base. And we need to make sure that we have enough chests to do so. Now, that wasn't going to be the major problem. It was going to be also a problem of how much can we fit into TC and how much can we actually move around. In addition to that, we also had to organize, and as you can see, we had over 5,000 sulfur, so automatically it was profit. We also had a whole bunch of high qual, which meant that we could now completely armor up our base, even though we didn't really need to. As for ammo, yeah, we had plenty. My suspicion was that we either had taken out a couple turrets that we weren't able to bait previously, or that they additionally had some chests that were full of ammo. We continued to go back, and as we quickly realized, not only were there broken loot boxes on the ground, but there were some in trees and areas that we couldn't get to, which was a shame. And the ones on the ground, well, now we had to contend with going after landmines. Some of the loot was actually pretty juicy, and when we came to Sabretooth, we realized that his other friend wasn't there. It's possible that they had an additional base, or that his friend had logged off somewhere else, or had died and just said, I'll just respawn somewhere else. Sorry. There wasn't really anything on Sabretooth that we really wanted, so... it was whatever. There was one piece of sulfur, but in the grand scheme of things where we had stacks and stacks of it already, it wasn't really anything. So we had to keep running back and forth and trying to get rid of our loot, when we quickly realized that we are going to have to recycle some at this point. But it wasn't at the point of time yet where we would do so. I had to carefully, every time we came back, jump on the routes, because it was the safest route to get back to where all the loot was, and so we could avoid the landmines. Thankfully, up to this point, no one had either realized that we were A, raiding, or B, they just didn't care and thought, well, maybe it's not worth it. Everybody had known about the tower, though, and everybody was annoyed at where it was, and we knew everybody was trying to prepare to be the first ones to take it down. However, there were many other people in teams, so me and Kitsune had the definite advantage there of being in a team, and the advantage of us having really weird time schedules, and sleep schedules and time zones and everything else that also put us at an advantage. You see, Kitsune lives in Australia, and I live in Canada, or a part of Canada. Because at the time I was having problems sleeping, and because I was unemployed and couldn't find work at all, I had almost all the time in the world to go ahead and basically play the grind game and gather resources and even scout things out. Whereas Kitsune, because of his time zone, would be able to get on at weird hours where, lot of people in the server just weren't on at all. So at one point, as you can probably see, I'm sitting there trying to jump up and get back into the base to get loot when I inevitably slipped off the edge and fell into a landmine. Whoops. Thankfully we had bags in our base, so it didn't take too long to get back, just so I can get the supplies. And, well, once again, this is back when I was a noob, so I didn't realize that you could do things faster, and by faster I mean putting on your gear faster. And this was also before you could hold down H and just mouse over all your items and then transfer them. So, yeah. But again, Kitsune was good at PvP, whereas I wasn't, at the time. And luckily for me, again, we weren't countered. It is also possible that they saw the tower came down and realized that there was no sense of even countering it because, well, everything would be on the ground and we could just hop back up and have the high ground. It really didn't matter. There was a lot of items that we just didn't need, and rather than recycle them, it was just a quickly, well, before they despawn, just toss them on the ground, and later we can just come back and scoop them back up and recycle them again. But my biggest concern was Sabretooth. I wasn't sure if he was going to immediately pop back on, or unexpectedly pop on, rather, while we were in the middle of moving loot around. But at the same time, we also didn't want to kill him, because if we killed him, he would then know who to seek revenge on. Meanwhile, as I was trying to gather items, especially towards the end of the raid, gather the last of the items, Kitsune was valiantly trying to jump up into the tree just so he could get one of the bags. Meanwhile, I was trying not to fall off the tree branches. And, well, yeah, that's creepy. In retrospect, I realized now that what we could have done was had somebody hop on top of one of the walls, have that other person jump on top of the wall, and then one person jump on top of the head and or shoulders of another person just to get up past that weird little bump in the tree. We might have been able to get it, and to this day, I still wish I knew what was in there. It was probably sulfur or something. Or who knows, it could have been something crappy, and us not being able to get it probably just saved us the time and effort and aggravation of, well, this isn't worth it. By this point, Kitsune had actually made off and came back to base with a whole bunch of items, and we were quickly realizing that, hey, if we want to move this back to our base and do it in, less trips, we're going to end up having to recycle some of the items. Besides, there's some items that we just don't need. So it was quickly decided that, while he sorted out the items so we could figure out what to bring back to base, etc., I would be the one who would be running back and forth recycling items. Now, Kitsune is great at organization and building and everything else, so he decided that he was going to decide and let me know what we could recycle so that I could go off and do so. Now, again, I was a noob player at this, so I didn't know where or even if there was a recycle station nearby. So I said, well, I'll have to end up running to one of these other places like a Bandit Supermarket. And then he told me, no, there's a recycler in Bandit. But then came the question of exactly what were we going to recycle. We had a whole bunch of ammo, but ammo's kind of useful. So were turrets. You can never have enough turrets. Well, this was back in the days before you ended up having to connect them all to power and everything. We also had some C4 and a lot of low grade and other resources. And his idea was, well, okay, well, what is it that we don't need or don't need to research or anything? So while he did that, I ended up having to keep tabbing in and out of game, as you can see, to chat on Discord. He could hear me because we were in a Discord call, but he couldn't respond back, at least by voice. So at some points I was typing back out to him, just for the hell of it. So eventually what he decided to do was he started moving things around in boxes and let me know which ones were which so I could take out the items. He'd also throw them out on the ground so I could quickly pick them up and bring them to Bandit just so I could recycle. In retrospect, I think it would have been useful to start learning electricity, but he had admitted at the time that he didn't quite know how electricity worked or all the intricacies with that. So we just said, well, the electronics we'll just get rid of. There was a lot of things like the trapdoors and the ladder trapdoors or hatch doors or whatever the hell you want to call them at this point. There was a lot of those too that we didn't need. He already knew the blueprint as well, so there was no sense of us keeping them around. We did need gears, however, so we decided, well, we'll use these. What I decided to do also to make it safer and less suspicious was to take off all my gear and run to bandit camp. That way, if someone decided to come after me or decided, hey, I could take this player down, they might have loot, by appearing as a naked, I would seem less appealing and less of a target. Also, I had headed it down because I really at the time did not know where the recycler was in bandit camp, and I ended up having to look it up. No shame in that, but for the sake of time, I edited it out. Now, as I said, we did need gears and ladders. Well, you can never have too many ladders either. Because, I mean, you could always use that to try and peek over somebody's walls or something like that. In retrospect as well, we probably could have used the grates, but Kitsun's logic was, well, if we put grates on stuff like our refinery, then that's going to keep people out, whereas if they tried to poke around, we might be able to trap them. Shifty fox. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Eventually, we ended up making back to base and running all the loot back home. Again, it was very uneventful, and we thought we were being followed once or twice, but it turned out to be nothing at all. And of course, we always took the best loot first. But before we left, I decided to take some of our wood and leave a nice little note for Saber. Basically quoting him and what his friends had said, basically to prove that, hey, somebody had heard you. He didn't know who heard him, and I didn't leave any note of who it was, but me and Kitsun thought it was cheeky. And we hoped that he learned his lesson next time before he decided that he was going to go ahead and roof camp.